The knife was 6 inches from my throat when I realized my own son was capable of murder. "You pathetic old hag." Jason snarled, his breath hot against my face as he pressed the blade closer. "Maybe I should put you out of your misery. Nobody would miss a worthless woman like you." At that moment, locked in my own bedroom with my 35-year-old son threatening to kill me, I knew I had 2 choices: fight back or die. My name is Margaret Wilson, and at 65 years old, I finally found the courage to tell you how my only child turned me into a prisoner in my own home, and how I planned the most dangerous gamble of my life to escape. But to understand how we reached that terrifying night, I need to take you back to where it all began to go wrong. And there are wounds that never heal, especially when they come from the ones we love most. But sometimes, those same wounds become the source of our greatest strength. Good afternoon, my dears. Everyone around here calls me Miss Maggie, and I'm speaking to you from my small kitchen table in Hopeville, Kentucky. The same table where my nightmare began and where it finally ended. For 46 years, I believed that unconditional love meant accepting everything, forgiving everything, enabling everything. I was wrong. And that mistake nearly cost me my life. I married Robert Wilson when I was 19, a man with calloused hands and the gentlest heart I ever knew. We tried for 6 long years to have children, praying every Sunday, visiting doctors in Louisville, never giving up hope. When Jason was born in December 1984, we thought God had answered our prayers. We were so grateful, so overwhelmed with joy, that we made a fatal mistake. From day one, we gave him everything and expected nothing in return. "He's our miracle baby," Robert would say, bouncing Jason on his knee. "After waiting so long, how can we deny him anything?" Those words would echo in my mind years later, when that same miracle baby had his hands around my throat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a loving mother created a monster, and how that monster finally pushed her too far. Jason learned early that tears were currency and tantrums were power. At 5, when he threw himself on the grocery store floor screaming for candy, I bought him 3 chocolate bars. At 8, when he punched a classmate, I told the teacher the other boy must have provoked him. At 15, when he failed algebra, I hired a tutor and did his homework myself. "Margaret," Robert would warn me, his voice heavy with concern, "you're not helping him by fixing everything. A man needs to learn consequences." "He's just sensitive," I'd reply, stroking Jason's hair as he smirked behind his father's back. "Some children need more understanding." Understanding. That's what I called it when Jason broke our neighbor's mailbox, and I paid for the replacement without telling Robert. Understanding was what I called it when he stole money from my purse and I pretended not to notice. Understanding was what I called it when he quit his first job after 3 days because his boss didn't appreciate his ideas. Robert saw what I refused to see. During Jason's 20th birthday dinner, my husband pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Look at him, Margaret. Really look." I turned to see Jason lounging in the living room, feet on the coffee table, demanding Robert bring him another beer while he played video games. Our 20-year-old son hadn't worked a day in his life, hadn't contributed a penny to the household, hadn't even bothered to help clear his own birthday dinner. "He's still finding himself," I whispered. "He's not finding himself. He's found us," Robert said grimly. "And he knows we'll take care of everything while he does nothing." But I couldn't see it. Or I wouldn't see it. Jason was my baby, my miracle, my purpose. Without him to protect and care for, who was I? The years blurred together. Jason turned 25, still living in his childhood bedroom. 30, still expecting meals cooked and clothes washed. 32, still making excuses about why he couldn't keep a job. Robert grew quieter, more distant. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at Jason with an expression I couldn't name, disappointment mixed with something darker. "We created this," Robert said one night, his voice barely above a whisper. We made him this way. He'll change, I insisted. When he's ready. Robert turned to look at me with eyes full of sadness. Margaret, he's never going to be ready. We made sure of that. Those were some of the last words my husband ever spoke about our son. 3 months later, Robert collapsed in the garage while changing the oil in his pickup truck. Massive heart attack, the paramedics said. Gone before they could get him to the hospital. At Robert's funeral, Jason cried like a lost child. He clung to me, sobbing into my shoulder, and for a moment, I thought maybe this tragedy would mature him, make him realize he needed to step up and be the man of the house. I was wrong about that too. Dead wrong. Robert had been gone exactly 1 month when Jason showed me his true face. I was in the kitchen making his favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes, crispy bacon, fresh orange juice, trying to lift both our spirits. The grief was overwhelming. Some mornings I could barely get out of bed. But Jason needed me, and caring for him gave me purpose. Mom, he said, entering the kitchen with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, predatory. We need to talk about how things are going to work now. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? He sat down heavily, spreading his arms across the back of the chair like he owned the place. Which, I suppose in his mind, he now did. First, the money situation. You're getting Walworth 347s a month from Dad's Social Security and pension. That needs to be managed properly. I nodded, flipping pancakes. I've always handled our finances just fine, Jason. Your father trusted me with... Dad was too soft. He interrupted, his voice sharp. Look where that got us. Living paycheck to paycheck, never any savings. You clearly can't handle money. The spatula trembled in my hand. Jason, we lived modestly because we spent on your needs. Your clothes, your food, your... Exactly. You spent badly. That's why I'm taking over the finances. He held out his hand. Give me the debit cards and checkbook. Something cold settled in my stomach. Honey, that's my money. I need to... Your money. His laugh was cruel, unfamiliar. Mom, you're 61 years old. You don't understand modern finances, inflation, budgeting. You're too old and too emotional to make smart decisions. The words hit me like slaps. Too old, too emotional, too stupid to manage my own money. But Jason, I've managed this household for 37 years. I think I can... The cards, Mom, now? His voice had changed completely. Gone was the whiny, dependent boy I'd babied for 32 years. In his place sat a stranger with cold eyes and a harder mouth. This person frightened me in a way I didn't understand. With shaking hands, I retrieved my purse and handed over the cards and checkbook. Jason smiled, but it wasn't the smile I remembered from his childhood. This smile had teeth. Good. Now we can run this house efficiently. He pocketed everything. From now on, you ask me when you need money, for anything. Even for groceries? Everything goes through me. This is for your own good, Mom. You'll see. That afternoon, I needed to buy groceries. We were out of milk, bread, and vegetables. I approached Jason, nervously hating that I had to ask permission to spend money that was rightfully mine. I need about $60 for groceries, I said, plus $60. He looked up from his phone with annoyance. What are you buying? Caviar? Here's $30. Make it stretch. $30 wouldn't buy half of what we needed. Jason, that's not enough for... Then you're shopping wrong. Figure it out. At the grocery store, I stood in the aisles doing math in my head, putting back items, choosing the cheapest options. Mrs. Henderson, who'd known me for 20 years, watched me count pennies at the checkout. Everything all right, Margaret? You seem stressed. I forced a smile. Just being careful with money. But Mrs. Henderson's concerned eyes followed me out of the store. She knew something was wrong. When I got home with half-empty grocery bags, Jason barely looked up. Where's my sandwich meat? He asked. I couldn't afford it with $30. Then you're terrible at shopping. Mom, this is exactly why you need supervision. You can't even buy groceries properly. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since Robert's funeral. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of humiliation. In one day, My own son had reduced me from an independent woman to a child begging for allowance. And this was just the beginning. Evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and pitchforks. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you love speaking words of concern while tightening the chains around your soul. Control, I learned, is like a spider's web. It's built strand by strand until the victim is completely trapped. The financial control was just the first strand. Within 2 weeks, Jason had installed himself as gatekeeper of everything in my life. I couldn't leave the house without explaining where I was going and when I'd return. I couldn't receive visitors without his permission. I couldn't even use the phone without asking. "Where are you going?" he'd demand whenever I reached for my car keys. "Just to see Betty Thompson. She's been sick and—" "Mrs. Thompson is 90 years old and complains about everything. You don't need that negativity." He'd pluck the keys from my hand. "Besides, you have plenty to do here. The house is a mess." The house was never a mess. I cleaned obsessively, desperate to avoid his criticism. But Jason always found fault. A spot on a glass, dust on a bookshelf, wrinkles in his laundry. "Mom, this is unacceptable," he'd say, holding up a shirt that looked perfectly clean to me. "Look at this collar. What are people going to think?" People. As if Jason ever went anywhere that people might see him. My social isolation happened gradually. Betty Thompson stopped coming by after Jason answered the door 3 times in a row and told her I was indisposed. My sister Claire's phone calls went unanswered because Jason claimed the landline was too expensive and cut it off. When neighbors invited me to church functions, Jason had reasons I couldn't go. I was feeling unwell. I had housework to catch up on. I was getting confused and might embarrass myself. The physical abuse started small. A pinch on the arm when I served dinner late. A shove when I was moving too slowly. Hair pulled when I asked too many questions about money. "Mom, you're so clumsy lately," he'd say after pushing me into the counter. "Maybe you should see a doctor about your balance." He was gaslighting me, making me question my own perception of reality. Was I being too sensitive? Was it normal for adult children to manage their parents' finances? Was I really becoming forgetful and unsteady? The worst part was how he'd switch personalities. One moment he'd be cruel and controlling, the next he'd put his arm around me and speak in the sweet voice I remembered from his childhood. "I'm only trying to take care of you, Mom. After Dad died, you've been so fragile. I worry about you making mistakes. You know I love you, right?" Those moments of false tenderness were almost worse than the cruelty because they gave me hope. Hope that my real son was still in there somewhere, that this nightmare was temporary, that love would eventually win. I was wrong about that too. By winter of 2017, 18 months after Robert's death, I was completely isolated. No friends visited, no family called, no neighbors stopped by. Jason had effectively erased my entire social world, making me dependent solely on him for human contact. And that's when the real torture began. It was a Thursday evening in January. I was cooking dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, one of Jason's favorites. My hands were shaky because I'd skipped lunch. Jason had been monitoring my eating to help me lose weight and get healthy, which meant I got smaller portions and no snacks between meals. As I drained the pasta, a few strands fell onto the counter. Jason exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he screamed, storming into the kitchen. "Look at this mess. Food everywhere. Do you think we're made of money?" "I'm sorry, it was just a few pieces. Just a few pieces." He grabbed my wrist, squeezing until I gasped. "You wasteful old woman. Maybe you need to learn some respect for food." What happened next still makes me shake when I think about it. Jason forced me to pick up those fallen pasta strands and eat them off the counter, not with a fork, but with my hands like an animal. "There," he said, watching me chew the cold, unseasoned pasta, with tears streaming down my face. "Maybe now you'll be more careful." That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. Thin, frightened, broken. What had happened to Margaret Wilson, the woman who'd raised a child, managed a household, survived her husband's death? When had I become this cowering creature who ate food off counters because her own son told her to? For the first time since this nightmare began, a dangerous thought crept into my mind. What if Jason isn't sick? What if he knows exactly what he's doing? What if my son wasn't a confused, grieving child who needed patience and understanding, but a calculated predator who'd found the perfect victim? That thought terrified me more than any physical abuse ever could. By the summer of 2018, Jason had perfected his system of control. I lived by his schedule, ate what he allowed, spoke when he permitted, and existed solely to serve his needs. But even that wasn't enough for him. Like all bullies, he needed to escalate to maintain his power. That's when he introduced punishments. If I burned his toast, I wasn't allowed to watch television that evening. If I folded his laundry wrong, I had to rewash everything by hand in the bathtub. If I questioned any of his decisions, I went to bed without dinner. "These consequences will help you improve, Mom," he'd explain in a patronizing tone. "You've gotten sloppy since Dad died. This is for your own good." The punishments grew more creative and humiliating. I had to stand in the corner like a child when I talked back. I had to write apology letters for minor infractions. Once, when I accidentally broke a glass, Jason made me sweep the kitchen floor with a toothbrush while he timed me with his phone. "Faster, Mom. You're being lazy. In prison, inmates work much harder than this." Prison. The comparison wasn't accidental. Jason knew exactly what he was doing. He was breaking me down, psychologically destroying my sense of self-worth, until I believed I deserved this treatment. And it was working. I started apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I thanked him when he allowed me small privileges. I felt grateful on days when he didn't punish me for anything. Classic abuse victim behavior, though I didn't recognize it at the time. The isolation was complete. My sister Claire had stopped trying to reach me after months of unreturned calls. Betty Thompson told her daughter I was acting strange and probably had dementia. The mailman noticed I never came outside anymore, but no one investigated further. In small towns, people mind their own business, especially when it comes to family matters. Jason was counting on that. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I was in the bathroom cleaning the toilet, one of my daily assigned tasks, when Jason burst in without knocking. "What's taking so long? I need to use this bathroom." "I'm almost finished," I said, scrubbing faster. "Almost finished isn't finished. Move." I tried to gather my cleaning supplies, but Jason was impatient. He shoved me aside, and I fell against the bathtub, hitting my shoulder hard on the faucet. Pain shot through my arm. "Ow, Jason, that hurt." He turned to look at me with genuine surprise. Not concern, but surprise that I dared to complain. "Did you just criticize me?" His voice was deadly quiet. "No, I just said it hurt when you—" The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My head snapped sideways, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. "Don't you ever speak to me in that tone again," he hissed, grabbing my hair and forcing me to look at him. "I am the man of this house. You are nothing but a burden I'm stuck with. Do you understand me?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Say it." "I understand. Say, I am nothing but a burden." The words stuck in my throat. This was what rock bottom looked like. My own son forcing me to degrade myself in my own bathroom, while blood from my split lip dripped onto my cleaning clothes. "Say it, or the punishment gets worse." "I am nothing but a burden," I whispered. Jason smiled and released my hair. "Good. Maybe now you'll show some respect." He left me there on the bathroom floor, and for the first time in 2 years, something other than fear filled my chest. It was rage, cold, focused, deadly rage. But I was smart enough not to show it. That night, after Jason went to sleep, I sat in the kitchen and made a decision that would change everything. I was done being a victim. I was done making excuses for his behavior. I was done believing this was somehow my fault. Jason thought he'd broken me completely, but he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that I wasn't just his victim. I was his mother. I knew him better than he knew himself. I knew his routines, his weaknesses, his blind spots, and I was going to use every bit of that knowledge to destroy him. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she must choose between staying safe in her cage or risking everything for freedom. I chose freedom, even though it might kill me. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is that planning revenge keeps you warm during the coldest nights of your life. For 3 weeks after the bathroom incident, I was the perfect victim. I apologized more quickly, obeyed more completely, and showed gratitude for every small mercy. Jason basked in his total control, becoming more careless and comfortable. He had no idea that behind my submissive exterior, I was studying him like a scientist studies a deadly virus. Jason's routine was predictable. He woke at 9 a.m., demanded breakfast in bed, then spent the morning watching YouTube videos about cryptocurrency and get-rich-quick schemes. Afternoons were for video games in his room. Evenings meant television and demanding I bring him snacks and drinks like a servant. He rarely left the house, but when he did, he was gone for exactly 2 hours, long enough to visit his dealer for marijuana, a fact he thought I didn't know, and stop at the convenience store for energy drinks and junk food. More importantly, Jason had 3 weaknesses that I could exploit: his arrogance, his laziness, and his absolute certainty that I was too broken to fight back. My first step was gathering evidence. During one of his rare outings, I found his old laptop in the closet, the one he'd claimed was broken months earlier. It wasn't broken. Jason was just too lazy to fix a simple software issue. I spent an hour online researching domestic abuse laws in Kentucky, legal resources for elderly victims, and how to document abuse for authorities. What I learned both terrified and empowered me. Jason's behavior constituted criminal abuse, false imprisonment, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. In Kentucky, these were serious felonies that could result in decades in prison. But I needed proof. Solid, undeniable evidence that would convince police and prosecutors. That's when I remembered Jason's phone. He was constantly recording TikTok videos and Instagram stories documenting his boring life for the handful of followers who actually cared. He'd left his phone charging on the kitchen counter dozens of times, never thinking I'd be smart enough or brave enough to touch it. Wrong again, son. His password was pathetically simple. His birthday followed by 123. I downloaded a voice recording app and spent 20 minutes learning how to use it. Then I began recording everything. Every insult, every threat, every cruel command was captured in crystal clear audio. When Jason forced me to eat food off the floor the following week, I hid the recording phone under the tablecloth. When he screamed at me for breathing too loudly during his favorite TV show, it was all documented. When he shoved me into the refrigerator for taking too long to find his favorite yogurt, the sound of my body hitting the appliance was preserved forever. But audio wasn't enough. I needed visual evidence too. Using the laptop's camera, I photographed every bruise, every mark, every injury he inflicted. I took pictures of the meager groceries I was allowed to buy with his pittance. I documented the locks he'd installed on cabinets to prevent me from accessing his food. I photographed my own bedroom door, which now had a bolt on the outside that Jason used to lock me in when he left the house. Most importantly, I started keeping a detailed journal of every incident, including dates, times, and exact quotes. 27 years as a church secretary had taught me the importance of thorough documentation. Within 6 weeks, I had compiled what prosecutors would later call one of the most comprehensive abuse documentation packages they'd ever seen. But evidence alone wouldn't save me. I needed allies. Betty Thompson had been my neighbor for 15 years. Her late husband Earl had been Robert's best friend, and Betty had always been sharp as a tack despite her age. If anyone would believe my story and know how to help, it was her. The challenge was reaching her. Jason monitored my every move, but he also had patterns. Every Thursday at 3 p.m. he disappeared into his room for what he called important business calls. Actually phone sex with some woman he'd met online. He always used headphones and locked his door. That gave me a 20-minute window. On a cold Thursday in December, while Jason was otherwise occupied, I slipped out the back door and hurried across the yard to Betty's house. My heart hammered so hard I was sure she'd hear it when she opened the door. Margaret? Betty's eyes widened in shock. Good Lord, honey, you look terrible. I haven't seen you in months. Where have you been? I didn't have time for gentle explanations. Betty, I need help. Jason he's hurting me, badly. I have proof, but I need someone I can trust. Betty's expression shifted from surprise to fury in seconds. That worthless piece of trash is abusing you in your own home? I quickly explained the situation and showed her some of the photos on the laptop. Betty's face grew darker with each image. This is criminal, Margaret. This is serious jail time for that monster. I know, but I need help getting the evidence to the right people, and I hesitated. Betty, when I make my move, Jason is going to be dangerous. Cornered animals attack, and he's already threatened to kill me. Betty nodded grimly. What do you need? What I needed was an escape plan that would keep me alive. Can you contact Detective Ray Morrison at the sheriff's office? Tell him we need to meet secretly. And Betty, I need somewhere safe to go when this all happens. Jason will try to find me. You can stay here as long as you need. Earl left me his shotgun, and I know how to use it. Betty's eyes glittered dangerously. Let that boy try something. I'd love an excuse. For the first time in 2 years, I smiled a real smile. I was still terrified, still trapped, still in danger. But I wasn't alone anymore. And Jason had no idea what was coming for him. Detective Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s, who'd seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the real thing. When Betty arranged our secret meeting at the diner outside town, he listened to my story with the grim attention of someone who knew how badly these situations could end. Mrs. Wilson, what you're describing is felony abuse, kidnapping, and financial exploitation. With the evidence you've gathered, we could arrest him today. But I sensed hesitation in his voice. But your safety concerns are valid. Men like your son often escalate violence when they feel cornered. If we move too fast, he might hurt you badly before we can get him in custody. Detective Morrison leaned forward. I want to propose something unconventional. His plan was risky, but brilliant. Instead of arresting Jason immediately, they would give me a panic button and surveillance equipment. I would continue documenting abuse while they built an airtight case. When the time was right, they'd move in fast and hard. The goal is to catch him in the act of serious violence, Morrison explained. Something so clear and undeniable that no jury would ever question it. Can you handle staying in there a little longer? The question was fair, but unnecessary. I'd been handling it for 2 years. A few more weeks wouldn't kill me. I hoped. The surveillance equipment was smaller than I'd imagined. A tiny camera disguised as a button on my dress and a recording device hidden in my hearing aid. The panic button looked like a pendant necklace. If I pressed it, armed officers would storm the house within 3 minutes. Remember, Detective Morrison warned, don't take unnecessary risks trying to provoke him. Just document what naturally occurs. Men like Jason always escalate on their own. He was right. Within days of my return, Jason's behavior grew worse. It was as if he sensed something had changed, even though I was being more submissive than ever. Paranoia is common in abusers. They know what they're doing is wrong and constantly fear exposure. Have you been talking to anyone, Mom? He asked one evening, studying my face suspiciously. Who would I talk to? You don't let me leave the house or use the phone? Don't get smart with me. I know you're hiding something. He was right, but not in the way he thought. What I was hiding was strength, determination, and a detailed plan for his destruction. Every cruel word he spoke was being recorded. Every shove and slap was captured on video. Every threat was documented with timestamp and location. I was building his prison one piece of evidence at a time. The escalation Detective Morrison predicted came sooner than expected. On a Friday evening in late December, Jason had been drinking, something he rarely did, but when he drank, he became even more violent. "You know what your problem is, Mom," he slurred, cornering me in the kitchen while I washed dishes. "You think you're better than me. You think you're so smart, and I'm just some loser." "I don't think that, Jason. I love you." Love. He laughed bitterly. "You don't love me. You love the idea of being needed. You love playing the martyr mother with her difficult son." The insight was surprisingly accurate and completely unwelcome. But I needed to keep him talking. The more he revealed about his mindset, the stronger the prosecution's case would be. "If that's how you feel, maybe you'd be happier living somewhere else," I suggested carefully. Jason's expression turned ugly. "Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? Get rid of me so you can play the abandoned mother? Poor Margaret, whose ungrateful son left her all alone." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. "Well, here's the truth, Mom. You're never getting rid of me. This is my house now. You're just a tenant, and you'll do what I say until the day you die." "Jason, you're hurting me." "Good. Maybe pain will teach you respect." He squeezed harder. "And if you ever try to leave, ever try to get help, I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" All of this was being recorded in high definition, both audio and video. Jason was literally creating evidence of criminal threatening and assault. "I understand," I whispered, playing my role perfectly. But the next morning brought a complication that changed everything. I was making breakfast when Jason appeared in the doorway, not drunk anymore, but hungover and suspicious. He'd been thinking overnight, and thinking made him dangerous. "You know what, Mom? I've been too trusting, too soft. That changes today." He pulled out a chair and gestured for me to sit. "Empty your pockets, all of them." My heart stopped. The panic button was in my dress pocket. If he found it, I was dead. "Why would you want me to?" "Because I think you're up to something. You've been acting strange, and I don't trust you anymore. Empty your pockets now, or I'll do it for you." This was it. The moment that would determine whether I lived or died. And I was completely on my own. Time slowed to a crawl as Jason moved toward me, his eyes cold with suspicion. I had seconds to make a choice that would determine whether I lived to see tomorrow. The panic button was in my right pocket. The recording device was taped inside my bra. The camera button was on my dress. If he found any of it, he'd kill me. Not metaphorically, but literally. I could see it in his eyes. I said, "Empty your pockets, old woman." "Think Margaret. Think like the survivor you've become." I reached into my left pocket first, pulling out a crumpled tissue and placing it on the table. Then I reached into my right pocket, but instead of pulling out the panic button, I feigned a dizzy spell, the kind elderly people sometimes experience. Oh my. I swayed on my feet, grabbing the table for support. "I feel lightheaded." "Don't try to manipulate me with your fake sick act," Jason snarled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Empty the other pocket." I stumbled slightly, letting myself fall against the counter. In the confusion, I palmed the panic button and dropped it into the sugar bowl behind me. 27 years of church potluck coordination had given me quick hands when needed. "Here," I said, weakly pulling out my right pocket to show it was empty, which it now was. "I don't have anything, Jason. I don't understand why you're so suspicious." He searched me roughly, patting down my dress, checking my sleeves. His hands lingered near where the recording device was hidden, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he'd found it. But Jason was looking for things in pockets, not sophisticated surveillance equipment. "Turn around." I obeyed, and he checked my back pockets, my waistband, even my shoes. Finding nothing, he grew more frustrated. "I know you're hiding something. I can feel it." "The only thing I'm hiding is how scared you make me," I said truthfully. "Jason, what's happened to you? You used to be such a sweet boy." "Wrong thing to say." His face twisted with rage. "Sweet boy, I was never sweet. I was weak. You made me weak with all your coddling and protection. But I'm not weak anymore, am I, Mom?" To prove his point, He backhanded me across the face so hard that I fell to the floor. Stars exploded behind my eyes, and I tasted blood. "No!" I whispered from the floor. "You're not weak anymore." Jason smiled down at me with satisfaction. "That's right. And since you might be getting ideas about telling tales, we need to establish some new rules." He walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out the largest knife we owned, a 10-inch carving knife Robert had bought for Thanksgiving turkeys. The blade gleamed in the morning light. Rule number 1. You don't leave this house for any reason without my explicit permission. Not to get mail, not to water plants, not to breathe fresh air. He pointed the knife at my throat close enough that I could feel the cold metal against my skin. Rule number 2. If anyone comes to this door, police, neighbors, delivery people, anyone, you tell them you're fine and send them away. If you so much as hint that something's wrong, I'll cut your throat before they can help you. My hidden camera was capturing every second of this terrorist's monologue. Jason was literally confessing to kidnapping and terroristic threatening while holding a deadly weapon. Rule number 3. You sleep in the basement from now on. I'm locking you down there every night so I don't have to worry about you wandering around plotting against me. The basement was damp cold and had no phone or windows. It would be like being buried alive every night. And rule number 4. Jason leaned closer, his breath hot against my face. If you ever try to get help, if you ever try to leave me, I will hurt you in ways you can't imagine. I'll keep you alive, but I'll make you wish you were dead. Do you understand these rules? Mom, I understood perfectly. Jason had just graduated from abuser to kidnapper to potential murderer, and it was all being recorded. I understand, I whispered. Good. Now get up and make my breakfast. I want eggs Benedict, and if you screw it up, you'll be eating it off the floor again. As I struggled to my feet, Jason returned the knife to the drawer, but I noticed he kept glancing at it. He was escalating rapidly, becoming more dangerous by the hour. The knife had given him a new sense of power, and men like Jason were addicted to that feeling. While I cooked his elaborate breakfast with shaking hands, I mentally calculated distances and timing. The sugar bowl with the panic button was 6 feet away. If Jason went upstairs or to the bathroom, I'd have maybe 30 seconds to retrieve it and activate police response. But Jason wasn't leaving. He sat at the kitchen table watching me like a hawk, suspicious and alert. It was as if he sensed that the game had changed, that something was different about today. He was right. Today was different. Today was the day one of us was going to destroy the other. The question was, who would draw blood first? In the final moments before battle, predator and prey often look remarkably similar. The difference is that the prey has everything to lose, while the predator has already lost everything that matters. What I didn't expect was for Jason to get a phone call that would change everything. I was serving his eggs Benedict, trying not to spill anything with my trembling hands, when his phone rang. Jason glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted from suspicion to excitement. Hey, Marcus. Yeah, man, I've been waiting for your call. Marcus was Jason's former roommate from community college, a small-time drug dealer who'd been in and out of prison for years. Why would he be calling now? You're serious. How much are we talking about? Jason's voice rose with anticipation. Holy shit, dude. Yeah, I can be there in an hour. I just need to secure things here first. He hung up and looked at me with a mixture of greed and calculation that made my blood run cold. Change of plans, Mom. I have to go out for a few hours. Big opportunity. Something that could set me up for life. What kind of opportunity? The kind that's none of your business. He stood up, suddenly energized. But this complicates things. I can't trust you alone in the house anymore. Jason paced the kitchen, thinking aloud. If I lock you in the basement, you might find a way out. If I leave you up here, you might try to call for help. His eyes fell on the knife drawer, and I saw the solution form in his mind. My stomach dropped. Actually, there's a simpler way to make sure you stay put. He opened the drawer and pulled out the carving knife again. But this time, his intention was different. This time, he meant to use it. If you can't walk, you can't run away. If you can't use your hands, you can't call for help. Jason tested the blade with his thumb, drawing a bead of blood. I'll just damage you enough to keep you immobile until I get back. This was it. This was the moment Detective Morrison had warned me about. When cornered abusers become killers. Jason wasn't just planning to hurt me. He was planning to permanently disable me. The panic button was 6 feet away. I'd never reach it before Jason reached me with that knife. But I had one advantage Jason didn't know about. I wasn't the same broken woman I'd been 6 months ago. While he'd been perfecting his cruelty, I'd been rediscovering my strength. And right now, that strength was about to save my life. Jason, wait, I said, backing toward the stove. Think about what you're doing. If you hurt me badly, how will you explain it when people ask questions? Who's going to ask questions? You never leave the house, remember. No one will know until I decide to tell them you had an accident. He moved closer, the knife held steady in his right hand. Maybe you fell down the stairs. Maybe you cut yourself preparing vegetables. Clumsy old ladies have accidents all the time. My back hit the counter. Behind me was the stove, where a large pot of water was still boiling from cooking his eggs. To my right was the sugar bowl containing the panic button. To my left was the kitchen window that looked out toward Betty Thompson's house. Jason was 3 feet away, close enough to lunge forward and sink that blade into my chest. Any last words, Mom? Any final pleas for mercy? I looked into my son's eyes. Eyes that had once been bright with childhood innocence. Eyes that had cried when he skinned his knees. Eyes that had looked at me with love when I tucked him into bed. Those eyes were gone now, replaced by something cold and predatory. Just one thing, I said quietly. What's that? You should have checked the sugar bowl more carefully. Jason's brow furrowed in confusion, and in that split second of distraction, I grabbed the handle of the boiling pot and flung its contents directly at his face. His scream was inhuman. Jason dropped the knife and clawed at his scalded face, stumbling backward. I dove for the sugar bowl, grabbed the panic button, and pressed it 3 times. The emergency code Detective Morrison had taught me. But Jason, even half-blinded and in agony, wasn't finished. He lunged toward the sound of my movement, his hands outstretched like claws. You bitch, you crazy old bitch, I'll kill you! I rolled away from his grasp and came up holding the carving knife he'd dropped. For the first time in 2 years, I had the weapon and he was defenseless. Stay back, Jason. He stumbled toward me, his face red and blistered from the boiling water, his eyes streaming with tears. You think you've won. You think this changes anything? I know it does. That's when we both heard the sirens, distant but getting closer. Jason's expression shifted from rage to panic. You called the cops. How, when? I've been calling them for months, son. Every time you hit me, every time you threatened me, every time you treated me like an animal. It's all been recorded. Understanding dawned in his scalded features. The surveillance equipment. You've been wearing surveillance equipment for 8 weeks. Every conversation we've had, every cruel thing you've done, every threat you've made. The police have it all. The sirens were much closer now, maybe 2 minutes away. Jason looked toward the back door, calculating whether he could run. But his face was badly burned. He was disoriented from pain, and he had no car keys. This isn't over, he snarled, slumping against the refrigerator. Even if they arrest me, even if I go to prison, I'll find a way to make you pay for this. I kept the knife pointed at him while we waited for the cavalry to arrive. No, Jason, this is over. Finally, completely over. The front door exploded inward as Detective Morrison and 4 officers stormed into the house, weapons drawn. Police, everyone on the ground. In here, I called out. I'm Margaret Wilson. The suspect is Jason Wilson. He's injured but still dangerous. 2 officers immediately tackled Jason, who was too disoriented to resist effectively. Detective Morrison approached me carefully. Mrs. Wilson, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? I'm hurt, but I'm alive, and I have something for you. I reached under my dress and pulled out the recording device, then pointed to the camera button. 8 weeks of evidence. Everything you need to put him away forever. Detective Morrison smiled grimly. Ma'am, I think you just solved our case. As they dragged Jason away in handcuffs, his burned face twisted with hatred, he looked back at me one last time. I loved you, Mom. I loved you, and you destroyed me. For a moment, my heart almost broke. Then I remembered the taste of food from the floor, the feeling of his hands around my throat, the terror of living with a predator for 2 years. No, Jason, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. And then he was gone, hauled away to face justice for crimes that would keep him in prison for decades. I was free. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. With 8 weeks of high-definition video and audio evidence, Jason's public defender advised him to accept a plea bargain rather than face trial. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. Jason Wilson pleaded guilty to aggravated domestic violence, criminal threatening with a deadly weapon, kidnapping, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and attempted assault with intent to maim. The sentence, 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. I attended the sentencing hearing. Jason, his face still bearing scars from the boiling water, looked smaller somehow, diminished without his power over me. When given the opportunity to address the court, he stood and turned to face me. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. I became something I never meant to be. The apology felt genuine, but it came too late. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Jason, I replied, standing as well. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You made choices that led us here. I pray that prison teaches you what I failed to teach you, how to be a decent human being. It was the last conversation we ever had. The media picked up the story. Elderly mother uses hidden camera to expose son's abuse. And suddenly, I was receiving interview requests from across the country. I declined most of them, but I did speak with one local reporter whose own grandmother had been abused by family members. What would you say to other elderly people who might be experiencing similar abuse? She asked. I would say that you are never too old to fight for your dignity. You are never too afraid to seek help, and you are never too broken to heal. I looked directly into the camera. Love doesn't require you to accept abuse. Real love protects and nurtures. It doesn't dominate and destroy. The interview aired during the evening news, and my phone didn't stop ringing for weeks. Elderly women from across Kentucky called to share their own stories of family abuse. Some were ready to seek help. Others just needed to know they weren't alone. Betty Thompson became my unofficial assistant, helping me connect callers with resources and support groups. Together, we started what became known as the Margaret Wilson Network, a support system for elderly abuse victims who needed both practical help and emotional encouragement. You know, Betty said one afternoon as we organized pamphlets about domestic violence resources, Earl always said you were stronger than you knew. Guess he was right. I was learning that myself. The house felt different without Jason's presence. Not empty, but peaceful. I could watch whatever television programs I wanted, eat whatever food appealed to me, sleep in my own bedroom without fear. Simple pleasures that most people take for granted felt like luxury to me. But the healing wasn't immediate or easy. I had nightmares for months, waking in terror that Jason had somehow escaped prison and returned for revenge. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Every knock at the door sent my heart racing. Dr. Sarah Chen, a trauma counselor recommended by Detective Morrison, helped me understand that my reactions were normal. You survived 2 years of systematic psychological torture, she explained during one of our sessions. Your brain learned to live in constant fear. It's going to take time to unlearn those responses. Will I ever feel completely safe again? Safe is relative. But yes, with time and work, you'll develop new neural pathways that don't default to fear. You'll learn to trust your environment again. She was right. Slowly, month by month, the hypervigilance faded. The nightmares became less frequent. I began to remember who Margaret Wilson had been before Jason's abuse. A woman who enjoyed gardening, reading mystery novels, cooking elaborate Sunday dinners, and helping her neighbors. I started volunteering at the local women's shelter, sharing my story with other abuse survivors. Many of them were young women escaping violent boyfriends or husbands, but some were older women whose adult children had turned predatory. The shame is the hardest part, a 67-year-old woman named Ruth told me during a support group meeting. People think, how could you let your own child treat you that way? As if we chose this. We didn't choose it, I replied. But we survived it, and surviving makes us stronger than we ever imagined we could be. Ruth nodded, tears in her eyes. My daughter said I was too weak to live alone, too stupid to manage money, too old to matter. I started believing her. But you're here now. You got away. That doesn't sound weak to me. These conversations reminded me why I'd chosen to speak publicly about my experience. Shame thrives in silence, but it withers in the light of shared truth. 2 years after Jason's imprisonment, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I enrolled in community college. At your age? Asked my sister Claire, who'd driven down from Cincinnati to visit. Margaret, you're 65 years old. Exactly. I spent 2 years being told I was too old and too stupid to make my own decisions. Now I want to prove that neither was true. I majored in social work with a focus on gerontology, the study of aging and elderly care. My professors were initially skeptical of a senior citizen in their classes, but my life experience gave me insights that younger students couldn't match. For my senior thesis, I researched family abuse of elderly adults and proposed legislative changes to better protect vulnerable seniors. The paper was eventually published in the Kentucky Journal of Social Work, and portions of it were cited when the state passed stronger elder abuse protection laws. Graduating at age 68 with my Bachelor of Social Work was one of the proudest moments of my life. Betty Thompson was in the audience cheering loudly when I walked across the stage. Robert would have been so proud, she whispered as we celebrated afterward. I thought she was right. Robert had always believed in my intelligence and strength, even when I'd lost sight of both qualities myself. Healing isn't about forgetting the past or pretending trauma didn't happen. Healing is about reclaiming your power to write the next chapters of your life. 5 years after Jason's conviction, I received a letter that I'd been both expecting and dreading. The return address was Kentucky State Penitentiary. Jason's handwriting had changed. It was smaller, more careful, less arrogant than I remembered. Dear Mom, I know I have no right to contact you after what I did. I know you probably never want to see or hear from me again, but I needed you to know that prison has given me time to think about the man I became and the things I did to you. I've been in therapy for 3 years now. Dr. Martinez helps me understand how I turned into someone who could terrorize his own mother. The truth is hard to face. I became an abuser because it was easier than becoming a man. You gave me everything, and I turned it into an excuse to give nothing back. You protected me from consequences, and I learned to believe I deserved protection from my own choices. You loved me unconditionally, and I twisted that love into a weapon against you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to visit or write back. I'm just asking you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I became someone capable of what I did. I heard about your college degree and your work helping other abuse victims. I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have been proud of you all along, Jason. I read the letter 3 times before setting it aside. Betty Thompson found me crying at the kitchen table an hour later. Bad news, she asked, settling into the chair across from me. I'm not sure. Jason wrote to me from prison. He says he's sorry that he understands what he did. Do you believe him? It was a fair question. Jason had been manipulative for so long that trusting anything he said felt dangerous. I think I believe that he's learned something. Whether it's genuine remorse or just better manipulation, I may never know. Are you going to write back? I'd been asking myself the same question. Part of me, the mother part that would always love the little boy Jason had been, wanted to respond with encouragement and hope. But the survivor part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself, was more cautious. Maybe someday, but not today. Today I'm not ready. Betty nodded understandingly. Healing happens on your timeline, not his. She was right. I put the letter in a drawer with other important documents. Maybe I'd answer it eventually, maybe I wouldn't. But I wouldn't let Jason's attempt at redemption dictate my emotional state. That evening, I attended a support group meeting at the women's shelter. A new woman had joined the group, Maria Santos, whose 29-year-old son had been financially and emotionally abusing her for 2 years. He tells me I'm too stupid to handle money, too old to live alone, too much trouble for anyone else to care about, Maria said through tears. Maybe he's right. He's not right, I replied firmly. Those are the lies abusers tell to keep control. I know because my son told me the same lies for 2 years. Maria looked up with surprise. Your son? I shared my story. Not all of it, but enough to let her know she wasn't alone. I told her about the recording equipment, the legal proceedings, the healing process. Most importantly, I told her about the strength she didn't know she had. But how do you ever trust your own judgment again? Maria asked. If I was foolish enough to let my son abuse me, how do I know I'm smart enough to make good decisions now? Because surviving abuse requires incredible intelligence, strength, and resilience. You developed strategies to stay alive in an impossible situation. Those same skills will serve you well in freedom. After the meeting, Maria approached me privately. Would you help me? Would you teach me how to document what's happening, how to contact the police, how to make a plan? Of course. But Maria, you have to want it. You have to be ready to fight for yourself. I'm ready. I'm so tired of being afraid in my own home. Working with Maria over the following months reminded me of how far I'd traveled from that terrified woman eating food off the kitchen floor. I was now the person other abuse victims turned to for guidance and support. I was the expert, the survivor, the teacher. It was a role I'd never expected but found deeply fulfilling. Maria successfully documented her son's abuse and had him arrested. He pleaded guilty to elder abuse charges and received a 5-year sentence. More importantly, Maria reclaimed her life, her home, and her sense of self-worth. I could never have done this without your help, she told me after her son's sentencing. Yes, you could have. I just helped you see the strength that was already there. By my 70th birthday, I had helped 17 elderly abuse victims document their situations and escape dangerous family members. Each success felt like another victory over the trauma Jason had inflicted on me. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me. I was defined by what I'd chosen to do with my survival. The Margaret Wilson Network had expanded beyond Kentucky with support groups in 6 states and a website that provided resources to elderly abuse victims nationwide. I'd written a book about my experience, Breaking Free: An Elderly Mother's Fight for Dignity, which had become required reading in several social work programs. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Detective Morrison, now retired, stopped by my house on a Tuesday afternoon in spring. Margaret, I wanted you to know that your case changed how our department handles elderly abuse. We now have specialized training, better resources, and a protocol based partly on what you went through. That means more to me than any award ever could. There's something else. We've used your documentation methods to help other victims build cases against their abusers. In the past 5 years, we've prosecuted 47 cases of family abuse against elderly adults. 47 people are free because of techniques you pioneered. 47 lives changed for the better. 47 people who reclaimed their dignity and safety. That night, I sat in my garden. The garden I'd planted after Jason's arrest in soil, where I'd once been forbidden to walk freely. The tomatoes were thriving, the roses were in full bloom, and the herbs I'd planted filled the evening air with their fragrance. This garden was a metaphor for my life, something beautiful growing from ground, that had once been contaminated by fear. I thought about Jason's letter still unanswered in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I would respond. Maybe someday I would visit him in prison. Maybe someday I would offer him the forgiveness he'd asked for. But not today. Today, I was content to sit in my garden surrounded by life I'd chosen to nurture, thinking about tomorrow's support group meeting and the new victim who'd called asking for help. I was no longer Jason's victim. I was Margaret's champion. And that made all the difference. My dears, as I finish telling you this story, I want you to understand something important. I'm not a hero. I'm not exceptionally brave or unusually strong. I'm an ordinary woman who found herself in an impossible situation and somehow found the courage to fight back. If you're reading this and recognize yourself in my story, if you're living with abuse from someone you love, if you're being controlled or manipulated or hurt by a family member, please know this: you deserve better. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. You deserve to control your own money. You deserve to make your own decisions about your life, your health, your future. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter how old you are, no matter how dependent you might feel. Love doesn't require you to accept abuse. Family doesn't give someone the right to hurt you. Age doesn't make you less valuable or less deserving of protection. If you need help, reach out. Call the National Elder Abuse Hotline, 1-800-677-1116. Contact your local police. Confide in a neighbor, a friend, a doctor, anyone who will listen. You don't have to face this alone. And if you're not ready to reach out yet, that's okay too. It took me 2 years to find the courage to fight back. Healing and escape happen on your timeline, not anyone else's. But please remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to choose dignity over peace. It's never too late to discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Today, at 75 years old, I wake up every morning in my own home, make my own decisions, and spend my time helping other people find their way out of darkness. I have friends who respect me, work that fulfills me, and a future I'm excited to live. 10 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I was trapped forever, with no hope of escape. I was wrong about that too. If this old grandmother from Kentucky can survive hell and build a new life from the ashes, so can you. I believe in you. I believe in your strength, your intelligence, your worthiness of love and respect. I believe you can find your way to freedom just as I found mine. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't accept less than you deserve. You are valuable. You are loved. You are worth fighting for. And if no one else will fight for you, fight for yourself, because you deserve to write the rest of your story on your own terms.